Whenever a Yu-Gi-Oh card gets banned, Konami really tries to not mention it going forward. You don't want to acknowledge the fact that you made a card that was too overpowered that you had to take it out of the game entirely. Of course, when the card gets unbanned in the future, then they're all excited about it coming back. But in general, when Konami bans something, they don't ever mention it. You don't see it in the feature matches, you don't see it in the articles. That's just how Konami does things. But Firewall Dragon actually puts Konami in a very awkward position. You see, the trouble with pretending that Firewall Dragon doesn't exist is that because the card is a prominently featured card in the current Yu-Gi-Oh anime series, it means that Konami can't just brush it under the rug because we keep getting more cards that make a direct or indirect reference to Firewall Dragon. For example, in the very latest core set, Dark Neostorm, you have two cards that very clearly indirectly reference Firewall Dragon. Firewall Exceed Dragon and Firewall Guardian are both cards that, while they don't specifically mention Firewall Dragon, they obviously share part of the name and also bear a striking resemblance to the now banned Link 4 monster. Many people, including myself, actually guessed that one of the reasons that Konami was so hesitant to actually outright ban Firewall Dragon was because of this. It definitely is a weird situation, right? You have people that are watching the anime, little kids, and they want to come and actually play the physical TCG, but oh wait, one of the iconic cards from the anime that little kids are watching and getting excited about, when they come over to the physical card game, suddenly they're not allowed to play that card. That's not a really good customer experience. Now, I do applaud Konami for going out of their way and finally banning Firewall Dragon. It absolutely was a very difficult decision for them, and they probably had to talk to the higher ups to really convince them that, hey, you know this card that you're promoting a lot for the anime because it's sort of like the main monster card or one of the main monster cards that is featured in that series. Yeah, it's getting a little bit too degenerate for the TCG, and we've kind of banned like 10 other cards to keep this card around, but we really should ban Firewall Dragon. And I don't know exactly, we'll never know for sure, all the factors that went into getting Firewall Dragon banned. We don't know the discussions behind closed doors, but personally, and I think a lot of people feel the same way, one of the factors that led Firewall Dragon to getting banned was the Konami employees that were at the 200th YCS losing to multiple FTKs and extra link strategies that were abusing Firewall Dragon. I think for them, they thought that players were exaggerating because, to be fair, players do often exaggerate how powerful or how annoying a card is. I think it finally took them sitting down and losing to Firewall Dragon round after round after round to really realize why the card needed to be banned. But why am I talking about this now? It's true that Dark Neostorm has been out for a few weeks, and I probably wouldn't have done that little discussion as its own video. However, a new Firewall Dragon, another one, is being announced, and it's going to be a cover card for Chaos Impact, which was a core set that'll come out in the TCG in about 6 months. This card, once again, is a Firewall Dragon knockoff, although it's sort of like an upgrade because it's actually the first Link 5 monster we've ever gotten in the TCG besides the non-legal World's Prize cards. That's a pretty big deal, and it has the name Firewall Dragon on it, so once again, Firewall Dragon is an iconic Link monster that Konami just can't seem to shake. The good news is that this card is nowhere near as abusable as the original Firewall Dragon. Technically, it's an upgrade. It's a Link 5 monster. It has more attack. It has a few different effects. However, because this card does not have any infinite loop capabilities, and because this effect is tied to a pretty tight restriction, as you'll see in a moment, I don't think this card will be nearly as good, especially not to the point where it needs to be banned compared to the original Firewall Dragon. I think this card has an interesting application in a current meta strategy, but it's not coming out for 6 months. We don't know if that deck will still be around to the same capacity that it is right now. By now, I'm sure you guys have already noticed the arrow placements on this card. I don't think you can really ask for anything more. It's pretty unexpected for Konami to put all 5 arrows pointing towards you. Even the original Firewall Dragon had an up arrow as well, so I think that that works just fine. This card doesn't need to have 5 downward pointing arrows. That would be a little bit too overpowered just in terms of the sheer amount of cards that you could summon and the versatility, that kind of stuff. So I think that this arrow placement is perfect. It's sort of cool as well that it has 500 more attack than Firewall Dragon, although it is a Link 5 monster, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to summon. This thing takes 3 effect monsters, very similar to Borolo Dragon and Boral Sword Dragon, and I mean, if you think of Skull Dread, you technically can make it with 2 monsters, but you only get the big effects if you use 3 or 4 monsters, and I think that one of the ways that Konami is balancing these newer big Link monsters compared to Firewall Dragon is that they're making them take more than 2 monsters. One of the biggest problems with Firewall was that you could use 2 Link 2s to summon it versus Borreload or Boral Sword Dragon, where you have to use 3. And I think that doesn't seem like a big deal, but I think in the case of Firewall Dragon, it definitely made it a lot more abusable for more strategies. This card has 3 effects. The first one says, if this card is Link summoned, you can place counters on this card equal to how many different types of Cyberus monsters are in your graveyard, either Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, or Xyz. So at maximum, this card can have 4 counters on it, and all of the other effects here, the 2 other effects, are going to deal with those counters. Keep in mind that there are technically multiple Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, and Xyz Cyberus monsters. The problem is that most of them aren't very playable. I mentioned earlier that I think this card might have a place in a current meta strategy. Salamangreat currently uses, without using any weird engines, 1 Fusion Cyberus and 1 Xyz Cyberus. Both of these Salamangreat extra deck, I mean all the Salamangreat cards are Cyberus monsters, but also they naturally play a Fusion and an Xyz monster. This might be a cool sort of last effort ditch to like kill your opponent with this big Link 5 monster if you're already playing Salamangreats. And that's really what this card is on its surface level analysis. It's a big monster that decks like Salamangreats can take full advantage of. The second effect is during the battle phase, this card gains 2500 attack for each of those counters. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say something a little bit controversial. I actually believe that this card only needs 1 counter on it to be a pretty competitively viable card. With 1 counter, you will go up to 5500 attack when you attack something, but more importantly, when we look at the third effect, when an opponent's monster's effect is activated, you can remove 1 counter on this card to negate the activation. You can see that this card is a pretty big deal. It's a big monster that packs 1 negation, very similar to Borreload Savage Dragon, a new card that a lot of decks like Pendulums are taking full advantage of. Also, the third effect says, if this effect was activated at any time between this card's attack declaration and the end of the damage step, it can make 1 more attack in a row. Realistically, your opponent is probably just not going to activate anything in that window to avoid getting attacked twice or 3 times. Don't think that's going to happen very often, but it's worth mentioning. And I want to make it very clear right here that I'm not saying that this card is going to be used in the same way that Borreload Savage Dragon is currently being used, because that's a card that you want to summon on the first turn, and this one really isn't. Yes, it's true that you can summon this thing on the first turn, especially if you're playing a dedicated cyber strategy with all these different types, but in general, I think the spot for Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid is as a finisher, and that's a big distinction to make. This is not a card that you're summoning on the first turn by using all your resources. This is a card that you're using once both players have used many of their cards and you're down to a mostly simplified game state and you have at least one of these Cyberus types in your grave already. It's not that hard for Salamangreats to put out 5 Link materials. That's really not difficult for them, and they're all Cyberus monsters, and you have Cyberus in the graveyard to trigger this card's counter effect. I think that's a perfect fit for this card, but I think it's also important to mention in the future when we get more Cyberus monsters, this is going to be a card that you want to look out for, because anytime a deck gets a Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, or Xyz Cyberus monster, this is a card you can play. Like I said, I think this card only needs 1 counter on it to be competitively viable. It's a big monster, it has a lot of attack points, it has a negation, that's all you want in a big Link monster, and yeah, it takes a lot of resources. You have to use 3 effect monsters, it's a Link 5 monster, so you have to use some Link climbing in there. Luckily, Cyberus monsters are kind of known for doing that, so if you're playing these Cyberus extra deck monsters, you're probably playing Cyberus monsters in the main deck, which means you can make this card at ease in a lot of situations. But you're saying, Doug, I don't play Salamangreats, I don't play pure Cyberus, how can I actually take advantage of this card when it comes out in 6 months? Well, one other way at the moment for looking at currently legal TCG cards is Cyberus Quantum Dragon. Now this card isn't terrible, it's actually a pretty decent level 7 synchro monster that you can summon generically, but more importantly, it's a level 7 Cyberus synchro monster that can put a counter on this new Firewall Dragon. That's a pretty big deal, because I think you want to look at generic options as well as archetype options, which is like the Salamangreat thing, but this is a card that almost any deck can summon. Lots of decks are playing hand traps like Ash Blossom or Ghost Ogre, which are level 3 tuners, so all you have to do is summon 1 level 4 non-tuner to go with that hand trap to summon Cyberus Quantum Dragon, and then later on in the duel you can summon Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid as a big finisher. Here's the deal, Firewall Dragon will always be the most infamous Link monster. Maybe someday far away from here we'll get a new Link monster that takes its place as the most hated Link monster out there. However, it's just a really good example example of that Konami should put hard once per turn effects on cards released in 2019, especially the ones that are easily abusable like Firewall Dragon, like Sky Striker and Gauge. You'd think that by now they've learned their lesson, but every once in a while a non-hard once per turn effect slips through the cracks and it definitely causes a lot of havoc. But if there's going to be the first Link 5 monster that people can actually play at tournaments, is there any other better choice than a Firewall Dragon upgrade? Despite what everyone thinks about the card, and if everyone hates the card, it is still by far the most iconic Link monster, especially among the other Link 4s. Sure, Borreload and Saryuja and Boral Sword are very good cards and competitive cards, but in terms of appealing to the widest audience with the most well-known Link monster, it makes sense that Firewall Dragon is the first Link 5, even if it's an upgraded form. Anyway though, hope you guys enjoyed today's discussion video about Firewall Dragon, both past and present. I can't wait to see what this new future for this new Firewall Dragon holds. Hopefully it's not as abusable as the original. I'll see you later though. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.